Mortal Kombat 2, 2026 represents a decisive evolution of the franchise's cinematic ambitions, embracing the mythology that longtime fans expected while refining the foundation established by the 2021 reboot. This analysis explores how Simon McQuoid redirects the story toward the legendary tournament itself, giving beloved characters greater narrative importance and allowing Karl Urban's Johnny Cage and Adeline Rudolph's Princess Kitana to reshape both the film's humor and emotional stakes, alongside its spectacular martial arts choreography, graphic fatalities, and expanded exploration of Outworld, Edenia, and Earthrealm. The sequel reveals a deeper commitment to character, legacy, and the enduring appeal of one of gaming's most iconic universes. Picture the first image that greets the audience. Not an ancient prophecy, not a whispered explanation about mystical bloodlines, not another attempt to convince us that fantasy needs to justify itself with grounded realism. Instead, we open on a painfully cheap action movie set where Johnny Cage, played with effortless swagger by Karl Urban, launches into an exaggerated flying kick that misses its mark by several inches. The stuntman still falls anyway. The director yells. Everyone claps half-heartedly. And Cage flashes the kind of grin that belongs to a man completely convinced he's still Hollywood's biggest star, even if the rest of the industry quietly disagrees. It's ridiculous. It's self-aware. And within moments, everything changes. Because before Johnny Cage can finish basking in his own manufactured glory, the illusion collapses. The cameras stop rolling, but the performance doesn't. Reality tears open, dragging him away from fake explosions and rubber props into a universe where every punch draws blood, every defeat costs lives, and every victory determines the survival of entire realms. The joke isn't that Johnny Cage thinks he's an action hero. The joke is that this washed-up celebrity is about to discover that none of his rehearsed choreography matters when monsters, sorcerers, and ancient warriors are trying to kill him for real. That single transition tells us something the previous film struggled to communicate. Mortal Kombat 2 no longer wants to apologize for being Mortal Kombat. The 2021 reboot spent much of its runtime explaining powers through arcana, introducing an original protagonist named Cole Young, and building a grounded foundation before audiences were allowed to enjoy the tournament mythology they already loved. It wasn't entirely without merit, but every explanation, every invented rule, and every detour away from the iconic roster created the feeling that the film was negotiating with its own source material instead of celebrating it. This sequel approaches the franchise from the opposite direction. Instead of asking viewers to accept a realistic interpretation of impossible ideas, it embraces the impossible immediately. Gods interfere openly. Ancient kingdoms wage interdimensional wars. Edenia's tragic downfall casts a shadow across the narrative, transforming what could have been simple background lore into the emotional consequence of conquest, betrayal, and shattered civilizations. The scale expands overnight. Earthrealm is no longer the center of every conversation because the universe itself suddenly feels much larger, stranger, and infinitely more dangerous. Even the tone evolves. The brutal violence remains intact, but now it's paired with confidence instead of hesitation. Self-aware humor exists alongside mythic tragedy, martial arts spectacle, collides with Hollywood satire. Johnny Cage's sarcastic personality doesn't weaken the stakes. It highlights them by placing an ordinary ego inside an extraordinary conflict. His disbelief mirrors the audience's excitement as the film throws away restraint and finally embraces the operatic insanity that made the games legendary. And that leads us to the question hanging over this entire sequel. Can a franchise actually recover by admitting its previous strategy didn't fully work? More importantly, can it survive by pushing its own original main character into the background and handing the spotlight to the heroes fans had been demanding all along? Because Mortal Kombat 2 isn't simply introducing Johnny Cage. It is making a statement. Sometimes the boldest sequel isn't the one that doubles down on every creative decision that came before. Sometimes the boldest sequel is the one willing to look at its audience, acknowledge the criticism, and rebuild its identity around the very mythology that made the franchise iconic in the first place. Before we step into the tournament itself, it's worth understanding exactly where this journey is taking us. This isn't simply a scene-by-scene recap or a collection of Easter eggs hidden for longtime fans. Instead, we're going to examine Mortal Kombat 2 from the inside out, asking not only what happens, but why each creative decision matters for the future of blockbuster filmmaking and video game adaptations as a whole. We'll begin by breaking down the story and the mechanics of its expanding universe. The transition from Earthrealm's isolated training grounds to the vast kingdoms of Outworld fundamentally changes the scale of the narrative. Instead of treating the realms as distant mythology, the sequel transforms them into living civilizations with political tension, ancient history, and competing philosophies. We'll explore how the rules of the tournament evolve, how the larger conflict reshapes every character's motivation, and why embracing the franchise's mythology ultimately strengthens the storytelling rather than overwhelming it. From there, we'll move beyond spectacle and into character psychology. Beneath every fatality, rivalry, and supernatural duel lies a story driven by identity, loyalty, pride, and legacy. No relationship illustrates this better than the emotional conflict surrounding Princess Kitana and Shao Kahn. Their connection promises far more than a simple hero versus villain confrontation. It reflects the painful collision between family, duty, manipulation, and personal freedom, giving the film an emotional anchor that extends beyond the battlefield. If the action captures the audience's attention, relationships like these are what give the conflict lasting weight. Next, we'll examine the fights themselves, because choreography has always been the heart of Mortal Kombat. We'll analyze how martial arts performance, practical stunt work, visual effects, creature design, and CGI combine to create combat that feels simultaneously cinematic and faithful to the games. Rather than existing as isolated action sequences, every battle contributes to character development, world building, and narrative momentum. Finally, we'll step back and evaluate the film's broader cultural significance. Why does Mortal Kombat 2 arrive at such an important moment for Hollywood? What does it reveal about the changing relationship between studios and passionate gaming communities? And can its approach become a blueprint for future adaptations seeking to balance fan expectations with compelling cinematic storytelling? Answering those questions matters because this sequel exists within a new era where video game adaptations are no longer dismissed as impossible. Success is no longer measured solely by nostalgia or visual fidelity, but by whether filmmakers can translate interactive myths into stories that resonate with both devoted fans and entirely new audiences. By the end of this analysis, we'll see whether Mortal Kombat 2 merely improves upon its predecessor, or whether it helps redefine what modern video game cinema can become. For millions of players, Mortal Kombat was never just another fighting game. It was the game that gathered crowds around glowing arcade cabinets, where every match became a performance and every victory attracted another circle of spectators. Long before online multiplayer, people learned combos by watching strangers, argued over secret characters during school lunch breaks, and desperately tried to pull off fatalities before the timer disappeared. Those digitized sprites looked astonishing at the time, making every uppercut, every fireball, and every bone-crushing finishing move feel unlike anything else in the arcade. 30 years later, technology has transformed those blocky fighters into photorealistic warriors. But the excitement of stepping into the tournament remains exactly the same. That nostalgia is deeply tied to the characters themselves. Johnny Cage wasn't simply comic relief. He represented confidence bordering on arrogance, a movie star who could somehow stand beside gods and monsters without losing his personality. Kitana offered something entirely different. Beneath her graceful fighting style was a tragic story of identity, loyalty, and discovering uncomfortable truths about the kingdom she called home. Together, they became two of the franchise's most beloved figures, because they proved Mortal Kombat could deliver memorable personalities alongside unforgettable combat. Cinema, however, has struggled to capture that magic consistently.
The 1995 film earned lasting affection by embracing the spirit of the games, even when its budget limited what could appear on screen. Its practical effects, energetic soundtrack, and sincere commitment to the tournament created memories that still resonate with audiences today. Then came Mortal Kombat Annihilation in 1997, a sequel remembered less for expanding the mythology and more for demonstrating how quickly a franchise could lose its identity. Rushed storytelling, uneven performances, and underwhelming visual effects turned enormous potential into one of the most disappointing adaptations of its era, leaving fans wondering whether Hollywood truly understood what made the series special. Decades later, expectations changed dramatically. Audiences no longer accepted video game movies simply because familiar characters appeared on screen. Advances in visual effects, larger production budgets, and a growing list of successful adaptations raised the standard. Fans expected authentic world-building, emotionally engaging characters, spectacular action, and perhaps most importantly, respect for the source material. That expectation explains why the 2021 reboot created such divided reactions. It introduced compelling ideas and impressive action, yet many longtime fans walked away asking the same question. Where was the tournament? The series had spent years promising an epic competition between realms, only for the film to stop just before delivering the event everyone had been waiting to see. If you left that movie feeling something essential was missing, you're not alone. And that's exactly why Mortal Kombat 2 carries so much weight. It isn't just another sequel. It's an opportunity to fulfill a promise that fans have been waiting decades to see realized on the biggest possible cinematic stage. Every sequel begins with a question, but Mortal Kombat 2 faced a particularly uncomfortable one. After the 2021 reboot divided both critics and longtime fans, Warner Brothers and New Line Cinema had to decide whether the franchise deserved another chance, or whether the mixed response had already limited its cinematic future. Financially, The first film proved there was still a global audience eager to see Mortal Kombat return to theaters. Creatively, however, the conversation was far more complicated. The action sequences, visual style, and faithful character designs earned praise. Yet many viewers felt the film stopped just short of delivering the experience they had actually purchased a ticket to see. The most common criticism appeared almost immediately after release. There was no real Mortal Kombat tournament. For a series whose entire identity revolves around a legendary competition between realms, the reboot functioned largely as a prologue. It introduced Earthrealm's defenders, established mystical powers through the Arcana concept, and centered its emotional narrative on Cole Young, an original character created specifically for the films. While Cole served as an accessible entry point for newcomers, many longtime fans question why iconic fighters like Johnny Cage, Kitana, and several established champions were absent or pushed aside in favor of someone who had never existed within decades of game history. Instead of ignoring those reactions, the creative team appears to have treated them as valuable feedback. Producer James Wan had long understood that adapting video games requires balancing accessibility with authenticity. Introduce too much mythology too quickly, and newcomers become overwhelmed. Simplify the world too aggressively, and dedicated fans feel alienated. The first reboot leaned heavily toward accessibility, carefully explaining supernatural abilities, and constructing an origin story before embracing the franchise's larger mythology. The response suggested that audiences were more prepared for the bizarre, cosmic nature of Mortal Kombat than the filmmakers initially believed. Director Simon McWoyd faced a similar creative crossroads. Rather than defending every decision from the previous installment, the sequel's development reflected a willingness to recalibrate the franchise's priorities. Instead of building another story around explanations, the focus shifted toward fulfillment. Viewers wanted the tournament. They wanted familiar rivalries. They wanted larger realms, recognizable mythology, and characters whose histories already carried emotional weight before they ever exchanged a single punch. That philosophical shift became even more apparent with the arrival of screenwriter Jeremy Slater. Slater inherited a unique challenge. The sequel couldn't simply abandon everything established in the reboot, yet it also couldn't pretend the audience hadn't voiced legitimate concerns. His solution was not to erase the previous film but to reframe it. Rather than treating the 2021 story as the destination, Mortal Kombat 2 positions it as preparation for the saga fans expected from the beginning. The mythology expands naturally, allowing Earthrealm's earlier conflicts to evolve into an interdimensional struggle where Outworld, Ednea, and the tournament itself finally occupy the center of the narrative. Just as importantly, the screenplay redistributes attention across a genuine ensemble. Instead of relying on one newly created protagonist to guide every emotional beat, the story allows multiple characters to carry different parts of the narrative. Veterans of the franchise receive greater importance, while newcomers are integrated into the mythology rather than replacing it. The result feels much closer to the structure of the games, where no single fighter completely dominates the experience and every combatant contributes to the larger conflict. No casting announcement symbolized this course correction more than Karl Urban becoming Johnny Cage. Fans had speculated for years about who could embody one of gaming's most recognizable action heroes. Cage demands far more than physical strength. He must balance comedy with confidence, arrogance with vulnerability, and self-parody with genuine heroism. Karl Urban's career demonstrated an unusual ability to navigate exactly those contrasts. Whether portraying hardened warriors, morally conflicted antiheroes, or charismatic leaders, he consistently combined physical presence with sharp comedic timing. That combination made him an inspired choice for a character who frequently mocks the absurdity surrounding him, while still earning his place beside legendary martial artists. Bringing Johnny Cage to life also required significant preparation beyond traditional acting. Although modern filmmaking frequently combines practical stunt work with digital enhancement, Mortal Kombat has always depended on performers who can sell the impact of every strike. Urban reportedly undertook extensive fight preparation alongside stunt coordinators, working through choreography that blended cinematic martial arts with the exaggerated style fans recognize from the games. Every movement needed to communicate that Cage began as a Hollywood performer, before gradually evolving into a legitimate warrior capable of surviving impossible battles. Another equally important addition arrived with Adeline Rudolph as Princess Kitana. Casting Kitana involves far more than finding someone who resembles the character visually. She occupies one of the franchise's richest emotional positions, balancing royal dignity, inner conflict, compassion, and lethal precision. Her combat style depends upon elegance rather than brute force, demanding disciplined movement that appears graceful without sacrificing speed or danger. Rudolph's preparation emphasized both performance and physical training, ensuring that emotional scenes and combat sequences felt equally convincing. As the mythology surrounding Idnia expands, Kitana transforms from supporting fighter into one of the narrative's central emotional pillars. The production itself reflected this broader ambition. Australia once again served as the primary filming location, allowing the filmmakers to build upon infrastructure developed during the previous installment, while dramatically expanding the scale of production. Massive sound stages accommodated elaborate environments representing multiple realms, rather than limiting most scenes to Earthrealm locations. New sets depicting Idnia introduced a visual identity distinct from the darker, harsher landscapes traditionally associated with Outworld. Architectural design, costumes, color palettes, and environmental details helped communicate that each kingdom possessed its own history, culture, and political identity, rather than functioning as interchangeable fantasy backdrops. That expansion inevitably affected the budget and technical planning. Creating believable interdimensional worlds demands far more than impressive CGI alone. Practical sets provide actors with tangible environments, while digital artists extend those spaces into massive kingdoms impossible to construct physically. Visual effects teams face the challenge of seamlessly blending practical architecture, digital landscapes, creature animation, supernatural energy effects, and large-scale battle sequences into a cohesive cinematic world. Every new realm required its own visual language, ensuring audiences could instantly recognize whether the story occupied Earthrealm, Outworld, Idnia, or another dimension entirely. Scaling the sequel also meant coordinating hundreds of artists across departments. Costume designers translated iconic game outfits into functional live-action wardrobe. Makeup teams balanced realism with exaggerated fantasy. Stunt coordinators collaborated closely with visual effects supervisors so practical combat and digital enhancements complemented, rather than competed with each other. The goal wasn't merely to make the film bigger than its predecessor. It was to make every creative department feel unified under a clearer vision of what Mortal Kombat should ultimately become. Looking back, the production origins of Mortal Kombat 2 reveal something more significant than an ordinary sequel receiving a larger budget. They illustrate a franchise actively listening to its audience without surrendering its creative identity. Instead of abandoning the reboot entirely or stubbornly repeating the same formula, the filmmakers chose a rarer path. They accepted that the strongest adaptation wasn't the one trying to reinvent Mortal Kombat. It was the one finally confident enough to embrace everything that made the games unforgettable in the first place. Long before Mortal Kombat 2 reached theaters, the battle had already begun online. Every casting announcement, production photo, teaser poster, and rumor became another round in an ongoing conversation between the studio and one of gaming's most passionate fan communities. Unlike many blockbuster sequels that simply promise more spectacle than their predecessors, this campaign carried an additional burden. It had to convince skeptical audiences that the filmmakers genuinely understood why the 2021 reboot divided opinion and, more importantly, that they had learned from those reactions rather than dismissing them. That challenge shaped nearly every aspect of the marketing strategy. Instead of asking viewers to forget the previous film, Warner Brothers and New Line gradually reframed the sequel as the movie many fans believed they were getting the first time. The campaign didn't aggressively criticize the reboot, but it subtly shifted attention toward the very elements audiences had been requesting for years. Familiar fighters occupied center stage. The tournament became the dominant visual motif. The mythology expanded beyond Earthrealm. Every trailer suggested that the franchise was finally embracing the larger, stranger universe that longtime players already knew by heart. Nothing generated more discussion than the arrival of the first Red Band trailer. The decision to release an uncensored preview immediately communicated confidence in the franchise's identity. Rather than hiding the brutal violence behind carefully edited television spots, the marketing leaned directly into the series' defining characteristic: bone-crushing blows, supernatural powers, grotesque fatalities, and spectacular martial arts choreography dominated the footage. Yet the trailers were careful not to reveal entire finishing moves. Instead, they teased brief flashes of iconic attacks, allowing audiences to recognize familiar game references, while still preserving major cinematic surprises. That restraint proved remarkably effective. Within hours, social media platforms filled with frame-by-frame breakdowns as fans attempted to identify every hidden character, every stage reference, and every weapon visible for only a fraction of a second. Content creators produced detailed reaction videos analyzing costume designs, environmental clues, and subtle callbacks to classic games. Discussion quickly expanded beyond whether the visual effects looked convincing. The larger conversation became one of faithfulness. Fans weren't merely asking whether the action appeared exciting. They were debating whether this finally looked like the Mortal Kombat film they had imagined for decades. Fatality teases became especially powerful marketing tools because they represented more than graphic violence. They symbolized authenticity. Every carefully edited glimpse reassured audiences that the filmmakers were no longer hesitant about embracing the franchise's outrageous identity. Instead of apologizing for exaggerated brutality, the campaign celebrated it as an essential part of the experience. That confidence generated viral engagement precisely because viewers enjoyed speculating about what remained hidden just outside the frame. At the center of nearly every promotional image stood one unmistakable figure: Johnny Cage. The marketing understood something fundamental about audience expectations. Johnny wasn't simply another new character joining the roster. His absence from the 2021 reboot had become one of the most frequently discussed criticisms surrounding the previous film. By placing Karl at the forefront of posters, trailers, interviews, and promotional events, the campaign quietly acknowledged those conversations without ever needing to address them directly. Even more interesting was the role Johnny appeared to occupy within the narrative. Rather than positioning him as an unstoppable legendary warrior from the opening scene, the trailers emphasized his confusion, skepticism, and sarcastic personality. He reacted to impossible events with the same mixture of disbelief and humor many viewers naturally would. In effect, Johnny became the audience surrogate that the previous film had assigned to Cole Young. Instead of introducing an entirely original character to guide newcomers through the mythology, the sequel allowed one of the franchise's most beloved fighters to fulfill that function while remaining completely faithful to decades of established lore. This represented a subtle, but enormously significant narrative pivot. Cole Young never entirely disappeared from promotional material, but he no longer carried the responsibility of introducing audiences to every major concept. The campaign instead highlighted the ensemble itself, suggesting that multiple heroes would share narrative importance, rather than revolving around a single central protagonist. That change reassured longtime fans who worried the sequel might once again prioritize newly invented mythology over the iconic roster that defined the games. Naturally, excitement also fueled speculation. Early script rumors and alleged plot leaks began circulating across forums, video channels, and fan communities months before release. Some claimed to know the complete tournament bracket. Others described shocking character deaths, surprise appearances, or major betrayals involving familiar warriors. As with nearly every modern blockbuster, separating genuine information from fabricated rumors became nearly impossible. Every anonymous post sparked hundreds of reactions, while supposed insiders confidently contradicted one another on a daily basis. The studio's response demonstrated an increasingly sophisticated understanding of modern fandom. Rather than aggressively commenting on every rumor, the marketing team carefully released new footage at strategic intervals, confirming certain details while allowing other questions to remain unanswered. This approach redirected conversations away from unverifiable leaks and toward officially released material. Fans still debated every frame, but the discussion increasingly centered on what the studio intentionally chose to reveal instead of unconfirmed spoilers. Cast interviews further strengthened that strategy. Karl frequently discussed Johnny Cage's personality without revealing major plot developments, emphasizing the character's humor, confidence, and gradual adaptation to an extraordinary world. Adeline Rudolph spoke about Kitana's emotional complexity and the physical preparation required for her role, hinting that the princess would become far more than a supporting fighter. Other cast members echoed similar themes, describing a story that respected established mythology while expanding relationships audiences had only briefly encountered in previous adaptations. All of this unfolded within an unusually competitive theatrical landscape. The sequel occupied a coveted May-release window traditionally associated with major summer blockbusters, placing it alongside other franchise revivals, superhero spectacles, and high-profile reboots competing for audience attention. Success would require more than satisfying existing Mortal Kombat fans. The film needed to attract casual moviegoers searching for large-scale entertainment, while simultaneously proving that video game adaptations had fully earned their place among Hollywood's biggest cinematic events. Industry analysts therefore viewed Mortal Kombat 2 as something of a measuring stick. The 2020s had already witnessed a remarkable improvement in game-based films and television series, suggesting that studios were finally beginning to understand interactive storytelling, instead of treating it as inferior source material. If this sequel succeeded critically, commercially, and culturally, it would reinforce the growing belief that audiences no longer wanted adaptations that merely borrowed recognizable names. They wanted films willing to embrace the unique identities that made those games iconic in the first place. By the time opening weekend approached, anticipation extended far beyond simple curiosity about who would win the tournament. The real question had become whether Mortal Kombat 2 could complete one of Hollywood's most difficult transformations, evolving from a divisive reboot into the definitive live-action interpretation that fans had spent decades waiting to witness. Every trailer, every interview, every viral discussion, and every carefully managed reveal built toward that single moment of truth, ensuring the sequel entered theaters carrying not only enormous expectations, but the opportunity to redefine an entire franchise. Every great tournament begins long before the first fighter enters the arena. Mortal Kombat 2 understands this immediately, refusing to open with Earthrealm or another round of exposition. Instead, it reaches deep into the franchise's mythology, presenting a prologue that establishes the emotional and political consequences of conquest. Before audiences witness heroes preparing for battle, they first see the cost of defeat, and nowhere is that tragedy more devastating than the fall of Ednea. The kingdom is introduced as a realm unlike anything Earthrealm has previously encountered. Towering palaces stretch toward glowing skies, elegant architecture reflects centuries of prosperity, and every frame communicates a civilization built upon harmony rather than fear. The beauty is deliberate because it gives the audience something worth mourning. Ednea is not merely another fantasy location waiting to become a battlefield. It is a living kingdom with history, culture, and people whose lives are about to be shattered forever. Then Shao Kahn arrives. His entrance carries none of the uncertainty often associated with modern blockbuster villains. He doesn't negotiate. He doesn't hesitate. He advances with absolute confidence, embodying the philosophy that strength alone determines legitimacy. His invasion is not portrayed as a chaotic raid, but as an unstoppable military conquest, demonstrating why entire realms fear his name long before he exchanges a single blow with Earth's champions. At the heart of the invasion stands King Jarrett. Rather than presenting him as an invincible warrior destined for a glorious final stand, the film emphasizes his responsibility as both ruler and father. Every decision he makes during the kingdom's final moments reflects a desperate attempt to protect Ednea, rather than preserve his own life. Even knowing defeat is inevitable, Jarrett refuses to surrender his people without resistance, transforming what could have been a brief historical footnote into one of the sequel's defining emotional moments. His confrontation with Shao Kahn becomes less about choreography and more about ideology. Jarrett believes kingdoms are built through justice, compassion, and shared responsibility. Shao Kahn believes kingdoms exist only to be conquered by whoever possesses the greatest power. Their clash represents two completely opposing visions of leadership, making Jarrett's eventual death resonate beyond simple tragedy. When Shao Kahn strikes the final blow, he isn't merely killing a king. He is erasing an entire way of life. The consequences unfold almost immediately. Queen Sindel and the young Princess Kitana survive, but survival comes at an unimaginable cost. Rather than granting mercy, Shao Kahn claims them as trophies of conquest, absorbing Ednea into his growing empire while rewriting its history to serve his own ambitions. For Kitana especially, the loss extends far beyond family. Her identity becomes entangled with manipulation, propaganda, and years of carefully manufactured lies. The audience already understands that beneath the future warrior lies a child whose entire world disappeared in a single devastating invasion. This opening sequence quietly establishes one of the film's most important themes. The greatest battles in Mortal Kombat are rarely about violence alone. They are about stolen legacies, broken families, and individuals struggling to reclaim identities that powerful rulers attempted to erase. Before Kitana ever speaks, the audience understands why her journey matters. As the prologue concludes, the story shifts toward another consequence of Shao Kahn's relentless ambition. Death itself no longer provides peace. Hidden within dark temples far removed from Edenia's ruined beauty, Quan Chi continues weaving his sinister magic. Unlike Shao Kahn's overwhelming physical dominance, Quan Chi represents corruption from the shadows. His greatest weapon is not brute strength, but the ability to transform fallen heroes into unwilling servants, turning yesterday's defenders into tomorrow's enemies. The resurrection ritual unfolds with chilling restraint. Ancient symbols ignite across the chamber floor as dark energy gathers around lifeless bodies. The atmosphere feels less like triumphant rebirth and more like a violation of the natural order. Souls are not welcomed back into life. They are dragged from death through force, stripped of freedom, and bound to another master's will. Among the most emotionally significant revenants is Kung Lao. His return immediately complicates the emotional landscape established by the previous film. Once a courageous champion willing to sacrifice everything for Earthrealm, he now awakens as a weapon serving forces he once opposed. The tragedy isn't simply that Kung Lao has returned. It's that fragments of the hero audiences remember appear trapped beneath layers of supernatural corruption, suggesting an internal struggle that may continue throughout the tournament. Quan Chi's experiments extend beyond noble warriors. Kano's resurrection demonstrates an entirely different form of irony. Unlike Kung Lao, whose fall carries heartbreaking emotional weight, Kano returns with the same ruthless instincts that defined him before death, now amplified by dark magic. His unpredictable personality becomes even more dangerous because supernatural resurrection removes whatever limits mortality once imposed. Together, these revenants expand the roster while reinforcing the sequel's darker exploration of manipulation, identity, and lost humanity. With ancient history established and supernatural threats gathering, the narrative finally returns to Earthrealm. The tonal transition is immediate and intentionally jarring. Instead of royal palaces and necromantic rituals, we arrive on the set of a gloriously over-the-top action movie, titled Uncaged Fury. Explosions erupt on cue. Cameras glide across artificial smoke. Crew members scramble between takes while an aging action star confidently performs choreographed heroics designed more for entertainment than authenticity. That star is Johnny Cage. The film wastes no time revealing exactly who he is before destiny intervenes. Johnny lives inside his own carefully constructed mythology. He believes charisma can solve every problem, applause validates every performance, and Hollywood success proves genuine greatness. Even when his career shows unmistakable signs of decline, he refuses to abandon the image he spent years creating. His confidence borders on delusion, yet it remains strangely endearing because he genuinely believes every word he says. This ordinary world is interrupted by two unexpected visitors. Raiden and Sonya Blade don't approach Johnny with admiration. They arrive with urgency. Earthrealm's protectors need another champion. And despite his inflated ego, Johnny possesses qualities extending beyond celebrity status. He initially dismisses everything they describe. Ancient tournaments, interdimensional realms, immortal warlords, and supernatural assassins sound like terrible movie pitches rather than objective reality. Every explanation receives another sarcastic response because accepting their story would require dismantling the worldview that has defined his entire career. For a brief moment, the audience almost believes Johnny might simply walk away. Then reality forces the decision for him. Outworld assassins strike without warning. The attack tears through the artificial safety of the movie set, instantly exposing the difference between cinematic violence and genuine survival. Rubber weapons become real blades. Controlled explosions give way to supernatural destruction. Carefully rehearsed choreography collapses into desperate improvisation, as Johnny realizes the monsters surrounding him aren't actors wearing elaborate costumes. Everything he believed about himself is suddenly tested. His fame offers no protection. His stunt experience cannot fully prepare him. His confidence, once rooted in performance, must evolve into genuine courage if he hopes to survive. By ending the opening act with Johnny's illusion shattered, Mortal Kombat 2 creates the perfect bridge between ordinary humanity and extraordinary mythology. The fall of Ednea showed what is at stake if evil triumphs. Quan Chi's dark rituals proved that even death cannot end the conflict. And now, with Johnny Cage reluctantly pulled into a war far beyond anything Hollywood could ever imagine, the tournament's true journey is finally ready to begin. If the opening act introduces the scale of the conflict, the next chapter transforms that conflict into a mission. With Johnny Cage reluctantly surviving his first encounter with Outworld's assassins, disbelief is no longer an option. He has seen creatures that cannot exist, witnessed powers no Hollywood production could fabricate, and realized that the greatest performance of his life may be the one where no audience is supposed to exist. The journey from skeptical celebrity to reluctant champion officially begins as Raiden gathers Earth's remaining defenders at his sacred temple. The temple itself feels dramatically different from the isolated sanctuary depicted in the previous film. It no longer serves merely as a training ground hidden from ordinary civilization. Instead, it functions as the strategic heart of Earthrealm's resistance, a place where ancient history, martial discipline, and spiritual responsibility converge beneath the watchful presence of the elder gods. Every chamber carries the weight of previous tournaments, reminding the assembled warriors that countless champions stood here before them, each facing the same impossible responsibility. Johnny immediately disrupts that atmosphere. While everyone else arrives carrying scars, grief, or unwavering determination, Johnny enters with the instincts of a performer. He jokes about mystical architecture, asks whether hidden cameras are recording his reactions, and repeatedly compares the unfolding events to the elaborate fantasy films that once defined his career. His humor is entertaining, but it also reveals a deeper defense mechanism. Accepting the full reality of the situation would mean acknowledging that the carefully crafted image he spent decades building offers almost no value in this new world. His attitude quickly creates friction with the rest of Earthrealm's champions. Sonya Blade has no patience for distractions. Every mission she has survived reinforces her belief that preparation, discipline, and absolute focus separate life from death. Watching Johnny treat humanity's survival like another audition pushes her frustration to its limit. To Sonya, every sarcastic remark diminishes the sacrifices already made by countless warriors who never lived long enough to joke about the tournament. Jax shares much of that frustration, though his response is quieter. Experience has taught him that confidence means nothing without commitment. He studies Johnny carefully, recognizing flashes of courage beneath the arrogance but refusing to mistake charisma for reliability. Until Johnny proves himself under genuine pressure, Jax considers him another unpredictable variable in an already desperate war. Liu Kang occupies a more complicated position. Having embraced his destiny as Earth's spiritual champion, Liu understands that people confront fear differently. Rather than condemning Johnny outright, he sees someone desperately trying to maintain control through humor. Their conversations become an early glimpse of the emotional balance that defines the film. Liu represents calm acceptance. Johnny represents denial disguised as confidence. Their opposing personalities create tension, but they also hint that each possesses qualities the other lacks. Cole Young's presence adds another subtle layer. Unlike the previous film, Cole no longer functions as the unquestioned emotional center of the narrative. He has earned the respect of his fellow defenders through previous sacrifices. Yet even he recognizes that the conflict has expanded beyond any single individual. His interactions with Johnny carry traces of awkward competitiveness. Both men understand they are approaching the same war from completely different perspectives. Cole relies on experience gained through hardship. Johnny relies on instinct, improvisation, and relentless self-belief. Their uneasy coexistence reflects the sequel's broader shift toward an ensemble, where every fighter contributes without monopolizing the story. Before personal rivalries can escalate further, Raiden calls the warriors together. His explanation marks one of the film's most important moments because it finally formalizes the tournament audiences have anticipated for years. The Elder Gods established Mortal Kombat as more than entertainment or ritual combat. It exists as a sacred covenant regulating conflict between realms. Victory cannot simply be seized through invasion. Conquest must be earned within rules designed to preserve balance across existence itself. 10 consecutive tournament victories grant one realm the right to challenge another, preventing endless wars from consuming every dimension. The system, however, depends upon one critical assumption: that every participant respects the rules. Shao Kahn has no intention of doing so. While publicly acknowledging the authority of the elder gods, he quietly searches for opportunities to manipulate the tournament from within. His ambition extends beyond winning legitimate contests. He seeks loopholes, technicalities, political pressure, and supernatural interference capable of weakening Earthrealm before the competition reaches its conclusion. This immediately transforms the tournament into something larger than a sequence of individual matches. Every battle now unfolds beneath the constant threat that the rules themselves may be twisted by those unwilling to accept fair defeat. The tension escalates as the opening matches are announced. Sonya Blade faces an opponent she never expected: Sindel. For Sonya, this battle is intimidating because the woman standing across the arena is no ordinary queen. Corrupted by dark influence and manipulated into serving Shao Kahn's empire, Sindel combines regal authority with terrifying power. The fight becomes emotionally unsettling because fragments of the queen's former identity occasionally surface beneath the supernatural corruption controlling her actions. Sonya understands she is not simply fighting an enemy. She is confronting someone whose free will has been stolen, forcing every strike to carry moral weight alongside physical danger. The choreography reflects that emotional conflict beautifully. Sindel attacks with overwhelming elegance, every movement graceful yet devastating, while Sonya counters through discipline, military precision, and sheer determination. Neither combatant feels like a disposable obstacle. Instead, their encounter reinforces the central theme that many of the tournament's greatest tragedies involve people manipulated into becoming weapons rather than choosing evil for themselves. Then comes the fight that changes Johnny Cage forever. His first official Mortal Kombat match places him opposite Princess Kitana. At first glance, Johnny responds exactly as expected. He masks nervousness with flirtatious jokes, theatrical poses, and exaggerated confidence. He attempts to transform the arena into another stage where charm can compensate for uncertainty. But Kitana remains completely composed. Every movement communicates discipline refined through years of royal training and personal sacrifice. Unlike Johnny, she has lived with the consequences of Shao Kahn's tyranny for most of her life. The tournament is not an exciting adventure. It is another chapter in a struggle she has never been allowed to escape. As the battle unfolds, Johnny gradually realizes he cannot outsmart or outtalk his opponent. Kitana controls the pace with remarkable precision, forcing him to abandon rehearsed bravado and rely upon genuine adaptability. The more desperately he fights, the more obvious it becomes that she possesses countless opportunities to finish the match. Yet she doesn't. At the decisive moment, Kitana deliberately spares him. The decision initially appears confusing, especially from the perspective of spectators expecting ruthless competition. But away from watchful eyes, the truth quietly emerges. Kitana has never been fully loyal to Shao Kahn. Hidden beneath years of obedience lies a carefully protected alliance with Raiden, making her one of the most dangerous assets inside Outworld itself. Every act of compliance has concealed years of resistance, gathering intelligence while waiting for the moment when Earthrealm's defenders might finally possess a chance to challenge the Emperor's rule. For Johnny, this revelation changes everything. Until now, the tournament seemed divided neatly between heroes and villains. Kitana's secret exposes a far more complicated reality where loyalty, survival, and identity blur together beneath oppression. The war between realms will not be decided solely by who throws the strongest punch. It will also depend upon courage shown in silence, trust extended to unlikely allies, and the willingness to risk everything for a future that may never arrive. With the opening matches complete and hidden alliances beginning to surface, the tournament finally reveals its true nature. Every victory carries political consequences. Every defeat strengthens tyranny. And every fighter, whether standing openly beside Raiden or secretly resisting from within Shao Kahn's empire, now understands that the fate of every realm rests upon choices extending far beyond the arena itself. With the tournament officially underway, Mortal Kombat 2 refuses to settle into a predictable rhythm of one fight after another. Instead, it widens the battlefield, revealing that the matches themselves are only one part of Shao Kahn's larger strategy. Victory can be earned inside the arena, but domination requires something far greater. While Earth's champions focus on surviving each round, darker forces begin targeting the very balance that allows the tournament to exist. The conflict evolves from a martial arts competition into a desperate race against time, where every distraction creates another opportunity for evil to reshape reality itself. At the center of this hidden conspiracy stand Quan Chi and Shang Tsung. Although their ambitions differ, both understand that defeating Earthrealm's champions through honorable combat is an unnecessary risk. If the source of Raiden's divine authority can be stolen, the Elder God's protections become meaningless. Their attention turns toward one of the most dangerous relics in the franchise's mythology, Shinnok's amulet. More than an ancient artifact, it represents concentrated divine power capable of altering the balance between realms. In the wrong hands, it becomes less of a weapon and more of a shortcut around every sacred rule established by the tournament. Executing that plan, however, requires creating an opening. Quan Chi knows Raiden cannot simply be overpowered while standing at full strength. Even surrounded by enemies, the Thunder God remains one of the most formidable beings in existence. Instead of confronting him directly, the sorcerer unleashes a weapon designed to attack both physically and emotionally. Kung Lao. The Revenant's arrival carries heartbreaking weight, because the audience remembers exactly who he used to be. Once defined by discipline, sacrifice, and unwavering loyalty to Earthrealm, he now moves with cold precision, his soul twisted into serving the very darkness he once opposed. Every strike against Raiden feels unnatural, as though fragments of the real Kung Lao remain trapped beneath the corruption, powerless to stop the violence his body is committing. The confrontation unfolds with painful restraint, rather than explosive spectacle. Raiden hesitates. For a fleeting moment, he searches for signs that his fallen champion still exists somewhere beneath Quan Chi's influence. That hesitation proves disastrous. Kung Lao exploits the opening, landing a devastating attack that leaves the Thunder God vulnerable for the first time in the film. The wound itself is significant, but its true purpose becomes clear only seconds later. Quan Chi steps forward. Ancient incantations echo across the battlefield as dark energy surrounds the weakened deity. Shinnok's amulet begins absorbing the divine essence flowing from Raiden, transforming the relic into a vessel for stolen godhood. The sequence is visually striking because it reverses everything audiences associate with Raiden. Lightning that once symbolized hope now spirals into darkness, while the protector of Earthrealm watches helplessly as his own power becomes the instrument of its destruction. The objective extends beyond weakening a single opponent. Quan Chi intends to transfer that divine energy to Shao Kahn, granting the Emperor a form of immortality capable of placing him beyond the reach of both mortal champions and sacred tournament law. If successful, the conflict would effectively end before the final rounds even begin. Rules become irrelevant when one side can no longer be challenged by death itself. Raiden survives, but only barely. Recognizing that a direct assault will accomplish little while the amulet remains in enemy hands, Earth's defenders abandon the safety of the temple and divide into separate missions. The tournament continues in public, yet beneath its surface another war unfolds, one fought through alliances, espionage, and desperate attempts to prevent Shao Kahn's ascension. Johnny Cage, Liu Kang, Sonya Blade, and Jax receive perhaps the most dangerous assignment. Their search leads them beyond familiar territory into the harsh wastelands controlled by the Tarkatans. For decades, the Tarkatans have occupied a complicated place within Mortal Kombat mythology. Outsiders often dismiss them as savage raiders driven only by violence, yet the film deliberately complicates that assumption. Their homeland reflects generations of survival under brutal conditions, rather than mindless barbarism. Every scar, every weapon, and every defensive structure tells the story of a people forced to endure endless conflict, while more powerful rulers fought over the fate of their world. Winning their trust proves nearly impossible. The tribe has little reason to believe promises from Earthrealm warriors who suddenly appear requesting assistance. Suspicion dominates every conversation, and negotiations deteriorate rapidly until a challenge is issued in accordance with Tarkatan tradition. Johnny Cage must fight Baraka. For the first time since entering this universe, Johnny cannot rely on sarcasm to escape danger. Baraka represents everything Hollywood choreography never prepared him for. Overwhelming strength, ruthless efficiency, and absolute commitment to victory. The duel immediately strips away Johnny's remaining illusions about himself. Yet something remarkable happens. Instead of attempting flashy movie techniques, Johnny begins adapting. He studies Baraka's movements, accepts punishment without surrendering, and gradually discovers that genuine courage differs completely from performed confidence. Every decision becomes grounded in instinct rather than ego. The transformation is subtle but unmistakable. He stops trying to look like a hero and simply starts acting like one. When Johnny finally defeats Baraka, the victory resonates far beyond personal achievement. The Tarkatans respect strength earned honestly. Rather than humiliating their champion or celebrating recklessly, Johnny acknowledges Baraka's resilience with genuine respect. That single gesture accomplishes what violence alone never could. The tribe recognizes that Earth's champions seek allies rather than subjects, opening the possibility of cooperation against Shao Kahn's growing tyranny. While hope emerges in one corner of Outworld, betrayal unfolds in another. Kitana's carefully protected secret cannot remain hidden forever. Years spent quietly gathering information, misleading Shao Kahn's forces, and assisting Raiden eventually attract unwanted attention. Her divided loyalties are exposed, forcing the princess to abandon every remaining illusion of safety. The revelation is devastating because it confirms what she always feared. Living between two worlds inevitably demands a choice that can never be reversed. The person sent to confront her makes that choice even more painful. Jade, once Kitana's trusted bodyguard, closest companion, and unwavering protector, Jade now stands opposite the princess under orders from Outworld's ruling forces. Their meeting carries emotional tension long before either weapon is drawn. Shared history lingers in every exchange, reminding both women of a friendship fractured by loyalty, duty, and manipulation beyond either of their control. Their confrontation avoids reducing either character to simple hero or villain. Jade genuinely believes she is preserving order, while Kitana fights for a future free from Shao Kahn's domination. Neither questions the other's skill, but both question the path that brought them to this heartbreaking moment. Despite Kitana's determination, overwhelming numbers eventually tip the balance. She is captured, bound, and returned toward the very empire she secretly worked to undermine. By the end of this chapter, the heroes find themselves scattered across multiple crises. Raiden has been weakened, divine power has fallen into enemy hands, Kitana's cover has been destroyed, and Shao Kahn's ambitions grow more dangerous with every passing hour. Yet amid the escalating darkness, Johnny's victory among the Tarkatans offers a fragile reminder that trust can still be earned, alliances can still be forged, and even in a universe built upon endless combat, hope often survives through the people willing to fight for one another rather than themselves alone. Every epic reaches a moment where victory stops feeling inevitable. Until now, Earth's champions have survived through determination, unexpected alliances, and the belief that courage alone can compensate for overwhelming odds. Mortal Kombat 2 deliberately shatters that belief at its midpoint. The optimism created by Johnny's growing confidence, and the Tarkatan's support, gives way to a devastating sequence of defeats that fundamentally changes the emotional direction of the story. From this point onward, the question is no longer whether the heroes can win the tournament. The question becomes whether there will even be a world left to save. The journey begins beneath Outworld itself. Thanks to Baraka honoring the respect Johnny earned in single combat, the Tarkatans reveal a network of forgotten tunnels stretching beneath Shao Kahn's capital. These ancient passageways were once used to move supplies and refugees during earlier conflicts, long before the Emperor transformed them into abandoned ruins. The route offers Earth's champions their only realistic opportunity to reach the palace without confronting the full strength of Outworld's armies. The descent creates an immediate shift in atmosphere. Gone are the vast arenas and towering fortresses that symbolize Shao Kahn's public authority. Instead, the heroes navigate narrow stone corridors scarred by centuries of conquest. Broken statues, abandoned shrines, and faded murals quietly remind the audience that entire civilizations existed before Shao Kahn's empire consumed them. Every underground chamber feels haunted by forgotten history, reinforcing the film's recurring theme that tyranny doesn't simply conquer kingdoms. It erases their identities. Baraka proves indispensable throughout the infiltration. Rather than serving as a temporary ally who disappears after one heroic moment, he demonstrates intimate knowledge of Outworld's hidden geography, leading Johnny, Sonya, Jax, and the remaining warriors through traps, collapsed passages, and heavily guarded intersections. His guidance reflects another important transformation within the narrative. The heroes are no longer fighting alone. Former enemies, misunderstood tribes, and oppressed peoples have begun recognizing that Shao Kahn threatens everyone equally, regardless of their origins. Deep beneath the palace lies the destination they have risked everything to reach: the subterranean vaults. Protected by ancient enchantments and elite guards, these chambers hold artifacts accumulated through countless conquered realms, including the corrupted source of Raiden's stolen divine essence. Every step closer to the vault increases the sense that the heroes are approaching the heart of Shao Kahn's growing power. Yet even as they move unseen below, events unfolding above ground are already slipping beyond their control. The tournament resumes before a massive audience. Unlike earlier contests driven by honor and competition, these matches function as public demonstrations of absolute domination. Shao Kahn understands that fear can be more powerful than military strength. Every spectacle is carefully orchestrated to convince both allies and enemies that resistance has become meaningless. At the center of that display stands Kitana. Bound in heavy chains before the gathered warriors, she is presented not merely as a captured traitor but as an example. Shao Kahn transforms her punishment into political theater, publicly exposing the consequences of disloyalty, while attempting to crush hope among anyone secretly considering rebellion. The image carries enormous emotional weight because the princess who once represented grace, dignity, and quiet resistance is now deliberately humiliated before the very people she hoped to liberate. Yet even in captivity, Kitana refuses to surrender emotionally. She meets Shao Kahn's intimidation with silent defiance, proving that chains can restrain the body without conquering conviction. Her refusal to beg for mercy becomes its own form of resistance, inspiring those still willing to fight even as circumstances appear hopeless. Then the Emperor raises the stakes even further. Jax Briggs steps forward, fully aware that retreat would only encourage greater cruelty. Throughout the film, Jax has represented resilience, discipline, and unwavering loyalty to Earthrealm. He never sought glory or personal recognition. He fought because protecting others demanded sacrifice. Shao Kahn exploits that selflessness mercilessly. Rather than engaging in an honorable contest, he overwhelms Jax through sheer overwhelming force, demonstrating just how dramatically the balance of power has shifted since stealing Raiden's divine essence. Every blow reinforces the terrifying possibility that Earth's greatest warriors are no longer facing an opponent bound by ordinary limitations. Jax continues resisting despite impossible odds. Even battered and outmatched, he refuses to kneel. His final stand becomes one of the sequel's defining moments because it rejects the idea that courage depends upon the likelihood of success. Jax understands he cannot realistically defeat Shao Kahn in his current state. Nevertheless, he chooses to stand between the Emperor and everyone else, buying precious moments with his own life. His sacrifice devastates the remaining heroes. The loss extends beyond one respected fighter. Jax embodied stability within Earth's fractured team, consistently placing responsibility above ego. Watching him fall forces every surviving champion to confront the brutal reality that determination alone cannot overcome an enemy approaching godhood. As heartbreaking as Jax's death is, the emotional devastation has only begun. Liu Kang enters the arena carrying the hopes of Earthrealm. For years, prophecy and expectation have positioned him as the destined champion, the warrior whose courage and spiritual discipline would ultimately restore balance. Countless stories conditioned audiences to believe that Liu's path would inevitably lead toward triumphant victory. The film deliberately challenges that assumption. His confrontation with Shao Kahn begins with extraordinary skill, demonstrating exactly why Liu earned his legendary reputation. Precision, discipline, and inner peace guide every movement. Yet as the battle progresses, it becomes painfully clear that technical mastery cannot compensate for an opponent empowered by stolen divinity. The defeat is absolute. Every technique Liu has spent his life perfecting proves insufficient against Shao Kahn's overwhelming strength. More devastating than the physical injuries, however, is the emotional revelation accompanying his failure. He was never meant to carry this burden alone. For the first time, Lu recognizes that Earthrealm's survival cannot depend upon a single chosen champion. Prophecy may inspire heroes, but victory requires ordinary individuals choosing extraordinary courage together. Johnny, Sonya, Kitna, Baraka, Cole, and every other fighter possess roles just as vital as his own. This realization arrives too late to save him. Mortally wounded, Lu's body becomes engulfed in supernatural fire. Rather than presenting his apparent death as meaningless tragedy, the film frames it as transformation. Flames consume him, not with despair, but with quiet determination. His final promise echoes across the battlefield, assuring his companions that this is not truly the end. Whether through destiny, spiritual rebirth, or forces beyond mortal understanding, Lu vows that he will return when Earthrealm needs him most. Then he vanishes. Silence follows. The emotional impact is overwhelming because the audience witnesses the disappearance of the very hero everyone believed would lead them to victory. In a matter of moments, Earth's defenders have lost Jax, lost Liu Kang, lost Raiden's full divine protection, and watched Kitna remain imprisoned beneath Shao Kahn's authority. Every pillar supporting their resistance has collapsed. Standing amid the devastation are two figures nobody expected to become humanity's final hope. Johnny Cage, Sonya Blade. One entered the story as a fading movie star desperate to preserve his reputation. The other has spent years fighting impossible battles without seeking recognition. Together, they now inherit a responsibility neither originally imagined. The midpoint crisis doesn't simply raise the stakes. It completely redefines the narrative, forcing unlikely heroes to step beyond the shadows of legendary warriors. With Earthrealm on the edge of annihilation and Shao Kahn approaching unstoppable power, the fate of every realm now rests in the hands of those bold enough to continue fighting after every reason to surrender has already appeared. The final act brings every storyline crashing together, but not in the way audiences might expect. Rather than presenting a single uninterrupted series of fights, the climax constantly shifts between multiple battlefields, reinforcing the idea that no individual warrior can save an entire realm alone. Every alliance forged, every sacrifice endured, and every lesson learned throughout the film finally converges into one desperate effort to prevent Shao Kahn's victory from becoming permanent. It is no longer simply a tournament. It is the fate of existence itself hanging in the balance. As chaos spreads across Outworld, Johnny Cage realizes that defeating Shao Kahn directly is impossible, while the stolen divine power remains inside Shinnok's amulet. Destroying the relic becomes the true objective. Surprisingly, the mission draws together one of the most unlikely alliances in the franchise. Kano, motivated more by survival than heroism, reluctantly joins forces with Johnny after recognizing that Shao Kahn's growing power leaves no room for independent opportunists. Their uneasy partnership creates moments of sharp humor without undermining the escalating tension, proving that even sworn enemies can become temporary allies when confronted by a threat capable of consuming every realm. They are not alone for long. The spirit of Hanzo Hasashi, Scorpion, returns to aid the assault, embodying the enduring struggle between vengeance and redemption that has defined his story for generations. His arrival feels earned rather than merely nostalgic, connecting the climax to the emotional foundations established earlier in the saga. Alongside him stands a redeemed Jade, finally breaking free from the loyalty that once bound her to Shao Kahn's empire. Having witnessed Kitna's unwavering conviction, Jade chooses conscience over obedience, transforming former friendship into renewed trust. Together, this unlikely team forces its way toward the chamber protecting the corrupted relic, each member contributing different strengths to overcome defenses no single warrior could defeat alone. While the assault on the amulet unfolds, another confrontation carries enormous personal significance. Baihan, now fully consumed as Noob Saibot, emerges to confront Johnny Cage. This battle represents far more than physical survival. Throughout the film, Johnny has hidden insecurity behind arrogance, relying on performance whenever genuine confidence failed him. Noob Saibot becomes the perfect opponent because he strips away illusion, forcing Johnny to confront fear without jokes, cameras, or rehearsed choreography. Every exchange pushes him closer to exhaustion, making it increasingly obvious that ordinary determination will not be enough. Then something changes. Instead of fighting like an actor pretending to be a hero, Johnny finally embraces who he has become. His belief shifts from manufactured confidence to authentic purpose, awakening the legendary green shadow energy that has remained dormant within him. The power does not appear as an unexplained miracle. It feels like the culmination of his entire emotional journey. The same man who once measured success through applause now channels strength born from protecting others. Brilliant emerald energy surrounds his movements, amplifying every strike while visually separating this Johnny Cage from the self-absorbed celebrity introduced at the beginning of the film. The duel immediately transforms. Noob Sabat's relentless assault is finally matched by an opponent fighting with complete conviction. Johnny combines martial skill, instinct, and newly awakened shadow energy into a sequence that feels unmistakably faithful to the games while remaining emotionally grounded within the film's narrative. His victory is not presented as destiny rewarding a chosen champion. It is portrayed as personal growth made tangible, proving that courage developed through hardship can unlock potential impossible to discover through fame alone. At the same time, Scorpion, Jade, Kano, and the remaining warriors reach the amulet. The battle surrounding the artifact is chaotic, with every side recognizing that whoever controls it determines the future of every realm. After an exhausting struggle, the relic is finally shattered, releasing the stolen divine essence in an explosion of light and shadow that tears across the battlefield. The destruction instantly strips Shao Kahn of the overwhelming advantage granted by Raiden's stolen power, reducing the seemingly invincible emperor to mortality for the first time since the conflict began. That single moment changes everything. With the illusion of invincibility gone, Kitana steps forward. Her confrontation with Shao Kahn is deeply personal because it represents years of stolen identity, manipulated history, and unimaginable loss. This is not simply a hero confronting a villain. It is a daughter reclaiming the future that conquest tried to erase. Every movement reflects discipline shaped by grief rather than hatred. She does not fight for revenge alone. She fights for Ignia, for her family, and for generations who never had the chance to resist. Shao Kahn, deprived of divine protection, remains terrifyingly dangerous, but he is no longer untouchable. The duel reaches its emotional peak as Kitana refuses to allow fear to define her any longer. In one decisive final strike, she defeats the emperor who shattered her kingdom, ending his reign not through prophecy, but through unwavering resolve. His fall marks the collapse of an empire built upon domination, proving that power sustained through conquest can ultimately be undone by those courageous enough to challenge it. Victory carries immediate consequences across every realm. The corruption binding Ignia begins to fade as its people reclaim the freedom denied to them for generations. Rather than celebrating personal triumph, Kitana accepts the responsibility of leadership, ascending to the throne as Queen of Ignia with full awareness that rebuilding a broken kingdom demands far more than winning a single battle. Her coronation symbolizes restoration rather than conquest, completing the emotional journey that began with the tragic fall of her homeland. Elsewhere, the divine energy released from the shattered amulet returns to its rightful owner. Raiden regains his godhood, his lightning once again reflecting balance instead of loss. Restored to full strength, he repairs the damage inflicted upon the realms, re-establishing the sacred order that Shao Kahn sought to destroy. The tournament's purpose is preserved, the boundaries between worlds stabilized, and hope returns where despair once seemed inevitable. The final moments bring the surviving champions together, not as isolated heroes, but as equals forged through shared sacrifice. Johnny Cage stands among them transformed, no longer pretending to be the greatest fighter in the room because he no longer needs to. Sonya, Kitana, Raiden, and their allies have all changed in different ways, united by the understanding that Earthrealm's survival was never the achievement of one legendary warrior. It belonged to every person willing to stand together when defeat appeared certain, completing the film's central message that true strength is measured not by destiny, but by the courage to choose hope when everything else has been taken away. Every successful blockbuster needs a protagonist audiences can emotionally invest in, but Mortal Kombat 2 makes a surprisingly unconventional choice. Rather than centering the story on a prophecy-driven monk, an immortal thunder god, or a royal warrior seeking to reclaim a fallen kingdom, it places its emotional weight on Johnny Cage. On paper, that decision almost sounds absurd. He is arrogant, self-absorbed, impulsive, and obsessed with maintaining an image that everyone around him can already see is fading. Yet those flaws are precisely what make him the film's most compelling character. Unlike heroes born into destiny, Johnny begins his journey desperately trying to convince himself that yesterday's success still defines who he is today. When we first meet him, his goals appear almost embarrassingly ordinary compared to the cosmic conflict surrounding him. He wants another hit movie. He wants audiences to remember his name. He wants to prove the critics wrong and reclaim the celebrity status that has slowly slipped away over the years. Everything about his life revolves around performance. Every joke, every dramatic pose, every exaggerated entrance reflects a man who has spent so long pretending to be invincible that he no longer knows where the performance ends and the real person begins. Even while filming Uncaged Fury, there is an unmistakable sense that Johnny is chasing memories instead of building a future. His career has become a cycle of sequels, nostalgia, and manufactured confidence, designed to hide the uncomfortable truth that Hollywood has already started looking for younger stars. That surface objective is important because it initially appears completely disconnected from the larger narrative. While Earthrealm's defenders worry about extinction, Johnny worries about ratings and reputation. The contrast creates comedy, but beneath the humor lies a deeply human fear. Unlike immortal warriors who have centuries to define themselves, Johnny measures his value through public attention. Fame has become his identity, making the possibility of irrelevance feel almost indistinguishable from personal failure. This is the psychological wound driving his entire character arc. The film never reduces Johnny's vanity to a simple punchline. Instead, it explores how aging quietly affects people whose entire careers depend upon appearance, confidence, and public perception. Every action hero eventually reaches the moment when audiences begin asking who will replace them. Every celebrity discovers that applause grows quieter with time. Johnny has built his entire sense of self around being admired, so the loss of admiration feels catastrophic. His martial arts background complicates that insecurity even further. For years, Johnny has earned praise by portraying unbeatable fighters on screen. He performs carefully choreographed battles where every victory is guaranteed before filming even begins. The irony is devastating. He has spent decades convincing audiences that he is fearless while secretly avoiding situations where genuine courage might actually be required. His success has always depended upon illusion. That illusion completely collapses once he enters the world of Mortal Kombat. The monsters don't care about box office numbers. Ancient sorcerers have never watched his movies. Shao Kahn has no interest in celebrity. For the first time in his adult life, Johnny discovers that charisma cannot protect him from genuine danger. Every fight forces him to confront an uncomfortable question. If no one is watching, if there are no cameras recording his victories, and if nobody applauds afterward, who is he really? This internal conflict explains why Johnny initially responds to almost every crisis with humor. His jokes are not simply comic relief inserted for audience entertainment. They function as emotional armor. By turning terrifying situations into punchlines, Johnny delays confronting the fear that he may not actually belong beside warriors like Liu Kang, Sonya Blade, or Kitana. Comedy becomes a survival mechanism, allowing him to maintain control over conversations, even when he has lost control over his life. One of the film's smartest decisions is refusing to erase those personality traits completely. Johnny never transforms into a perfectly serious warrior. He remains sarcastic, theatrical, and occasionally reckless until the very end. What changes is the reason behind those behaviors. His confidence gradually evolves from performance into authenticity. Instead of seeking attention, he begins using humor to encourage others. Instead of protecting his ego, he starts protecting people. That transformation happens gradually through failure rather than instant revelation. His confrontation with Baraka teaches humility, because victory requires adaptation instead of showmanship. His interactions with Sonya force him to respect discipline over applause. His growing friendship with Liu Kang demonstrates that true leadership often speaks quietly rather than dramatically. Most importantly, Kitana's willingness to trust him despite his obvious flaws encourages Johnny to see qualities within himself that extend beyond celebrity. The emotional climax of his arc arrives during the battle with Noob Saibot. By this point, Johnny has already lost friends, witnessed sacrifice, and accepted responsibilities no actor could ever rehearse. Yet despite everything he has learned, his inherited shadow energy still refuses to awaken. The reason is surprisingly elegant. He is still fighting as Johnny Cage the movie star. Only when the battle shifts away from personal survival does everything change. Faced with the possibility of losing his allies, Johnny instinctively places himself between danger and the people depending upon him. In that instant, his motivation transforms completely. He is no longer trying to prove he deserves respect. He is no longer performing heroism because someone might remember his name. Every action becomes focused on protecting others without expecting recognition in return. That selfless decision unlocks the legendary green shadow energy flowing through his bloodline. The film presents this ability as more than a supernatural power-up. It symbolizes inherited potential finally activated by emotional maturity. Johnny's Mediterranean warrior ancestry, long hinted at within franchise lore, becomes meaningful not because it grants him strength, but because it responds to genuine character growth. The power was never absent. Johnny simply lacked the emotional foundation necessary to wield it responsibly. Visually, the green energy represents the union of two identities. The flashy confidence that once defined his public image remains present, but it is now supported by authentic courage rather than insecurity. Every enhanced strike communicates that Johnny has finally stopped pretending to be the hero. He has become one. Perhaps the most satisfying aspect of his journey is that the film never suggests fame itself is inherently negative. Johnny does not reject Hollywood. He does not abandon his sense of humor. He does not suddenly become an entirely different person. Instead, he redefines success. Acting, martial arts, and public recognition become parts of his identity, rather than its entire foundation. By discovering purpose beyond performance, he frees himself from the desperate need for constant validation. That is why Johnny Cage emerges as the emotional heart of Mortal Kombat 2. His story resonates because it extends far beyond supernatural tournaments and interdimensional warfare. At its core, it asks a question almost everyone eventually faces. What happens when the version of yourself you spent years presenting to the world no longer feels real? Johnny's answer is neither dramatic nor philosophical. It is deeply human. Real purpose begins the moment you stop asking how others will remember you and start asking how your actions can help someone else. In choosing sacrifice over applause, he becomes something no movie role could ever make him. A genuine hero. One of the reasons Mortal Kombat 2 feels more focused than many modern franchise sequels is that it understands not every villain needs the same kind of complexity. Hollywood often mistakes complicated motivation for compelling storytelling, giving antagonists lengthy speeches about misunderstood childhoods or morally gray philosophies. Shao Kahn is the complete opposite. He does not seek sympathy. He does not justify his actions through noble intentions. He is terrifying precisely because he has convinced himself that conquest is the only truth that matters. His worldview is brutally simple, and that simplicity makes him one of the film's most intimidating forces. From his very first appearance, Martyn Ford's physical presence communicates authority before the character even speaks. His towering frame dominates every room, making other warriors seem noticeably smaller without relying on exaggerated camera tricks. The performance understands that intimidation is not created through constant shouting. Shao Kahn rarely wastes energy proving his superiority, because he genuinely believes it has already been established. His confidence comes from absolute certainty, and that certainty becomes psychologically unsettling for everyone around him. Unlike Shang Tsung, whose greatest weapon has always been deception, Shao Kahn never hides behind manipulation when direct force will accomplish the same objective. That distinction is crucial. Shang Tsung survives by adapting. He studies weaknesses, exploits emotions, and patiently waits for opportunities to deceive his enemies. Every conversation becomes another battlefield, where words can accomplish what violence cannot. He is dangerous because no one can ever be completely certain whether he is telling the truth. Shao Kahn represents the exact opposite philosophy. He announces his intentions openly. He tells kingdoms they will fall. He tells rulers they will die. He tells warriors they cannot stop him. Then he attempts to make every promise a reality. There is something uniquely frightening about a villain who possesses enough power that subtlety becomes unnecessary. While Shang Tsung manipulates individuals, Shao Kahn conquers civilizations. His presence changes the emotional atmosphere of every scene because the audience immediately understands that negotiation has almost no value. He does not compromise because compromise would imply equality, and equality is a concept he fundamentally rejects. This philosophy extends beyond military conquest into his understanding of leadership itself. To Shao Kahn, compassion represents weakness. Mercy encourages rebellion. Tradition exists only until someone powerful enough destroys it. Every kingdom is simply another territory waiting to be absorbed into his empire. He cannot comprehend governments built upon cooperation, because his entire identity depends upon domination. The film repeatedly reinforces this through visual storytelling. Whenever Shao Kahn enters a room, everyone else's movement changes. Soldiers straighten immediately. Advisors choose their words carefully. Even powerful allies speak with measured caution, because they understand that disappointing the emperor can prove fatal. His relationship with Kitna provides the clearest window into that mindset. On the surface, raising the daughter of the king he murdered appears almost merciful. A less observant audience could initially interpret the decision as evidence that Shao Kahn possesses traces of compassion beneath his brutality. The film slowly dismantles that illusion. Kitna was never adopted. She was possessed. Every aspect of her upbringing reflects psychological domination rather than parental care. By claiming the child of King Jared after destroying Etnia, Shao Kahn transforms victory into something even more disturbing than military conquest. He attempts to erase Kitna's identity entirely, replacing memory with loyalty and heritage with obedience. If she eventually serves him willingly, his triumph becomes complete, because even the last surviving symbol of Edenia's royal family has accepted his rewritten version of history. This is why Kitna's eventual rebellion carries such emotional power. She is not merely rejecting an emperor. She is rejecting decades of carefully constructed psychological conditioning. Shao Kahn understands that physical imprisonment alone cannot secure permanent control. Chains can always be broken. Minds are far more valuable. Every lie he tells Kitna, every version of history he rewrites, and every relationship he manipulates serves the same purpose. He wants her to believe she never had another family, another kingdom, or another destiny beyond serving his empire. When that illusion begins collapsing, Shao Kahn's confidence briefly reveals something unexpected. Not fear, possessiveness. He reacts to Kitna's betrayal less like a ruler losing a soldier, and more like someone watching prized property slip beyond his control. That subtle emotional shift exposes one of his deepest flaws. He genuinely cannot understand why anyone would willingly reject power offered by the strongest individual in existence. Loyalty in his mind should naturally belong to whoever wins. The film cleverly contrasts this straightforward brutality with the ambitions of Quan Chi and Shang Tsung. Neither sorcerer shares Shao Kahn's obsession with ruling through physical dominance. Their interests lie elsewhere. Magic, forbidden knowledge, and cosmic influence matter far more than public displays of military strength. While Shao Kahn focuses on conquering kingdoms, Quan Chi quietly studies how to reshape reality itself. That difference creates one of the sequel's most fascinating power dynamics. Although they publicly serve the emperor, neither sorcerer demonstrates genuine loyalty. Instead, they recognize Shao Kahn as the perfect instrument through which their own ambitions might be realized. An unstoppable conqueror provides excellent distraction, while hidden manipulators pursue objectives extending far beyond ordinary warfare.